studio. This is the important one. Sure, I hit that one. All right, welcome back to another episode of Leaderful. We're going to dig into engagement surveys, employee experience surveys, the phenomenon of employee feedback, mechanism of a survey. Before we dig into that, I've got Pablo here with me today, so welcome Pablo back to the show.
Hey, Jeff. Hello, everybody. For anybody listening.
Right. Before we dig into what's broken and wrong and ways in which we can improve the survey experience in particular, I think it might be important for us to back up a little bit from surveys because they're just a tool for discovering what's meaningful to people. And I think we forget that often as leaders in these institutions. We get into employee engagement surveys, see them, we get them done, we do something with that data, nothing, or there's lots of problems with it. Let's park that for a second. And your perspective, how does surveys, particularly employee engagement, employee experience type surveys, fit into the work of discovery, the work of employee experience broadly?
This is the hopeful version.
Yeah, this is our future state. We were doing it well.
Now
we need.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Like you said earlier, surveys are just one of the tools or activities that organizations can use to get a pulse, capturing current state in that. So the feedback, the perspectives, the experiences, people that we are trying to create an exceptional experience for, to transform culture with, to find out what's meaningful for them, right? And so, we hear this a lot from clients that what they love most about the surveys, engagement center, is that it offers up a combination of quantitative and qualitative data. The quantitative data has many but it's a quick way to establish a baseline. If you see a number or you see a color, it signals conversation or something's happening. And then obviously then we measure things 3 6 months down the road. Now you have a delta that you can look at and assess progress. I think, where we see surveys playing a really critical role is in asking powerful questions that are inclusive. We'll get into that aren't, that allow people to feel safe in sharing feedback with respect to their experiences, that allow for the synthesis of that data to be done in a non-biased or really conscious way of bias, and to check against assumptions and then use to clear those assumptions and to have meaningful dialogue. I don't think that they really offer answers. It's more of a, hey, here's a signal coming back. Let's get curious about that signal and dive into understanding that more. And so, yes, I think we, even if we look at our minimal viable survey engagement, it needs to be wrapped around with services, facilitation, discussion. It can't be a standalone. The problem when it's a standalone is you haven't cleared those assumptions. You haven't gained shared understanding. And so I think that's an important piece of, the survey can't just be a standard.
Because there's so many different ways that survey can then be manipulated or used, or the data to support, things we already believe or validate those assumptions that we hold as individual leaders. I know, I've been guilty of this. I'm sure it's you zone in the thing that you think is important, and you lose the context, lose some of the bigger picture that the survey should help to illuminate. And so I think it's also important to mention discovery. Discovering is that first phase of making meaningful impact. Is we have to know what's here, what's the current state, and surveys will give you some of that, but they won't give you all of that. And so oftentimes we pair surveys with one-on-one interviews with key stakeholders or a cross section of employee groups to start to get that context, to get that perception of what's happening, as well as maybe focus groups or ethnographic observations or document reviews for those more holistic view. I think surveys often become this go-to default, or rather simplistic. Often just send us out this link, give everybody a week to respond, get a PDF report back, do something with it. And there's lots of ways in which that system fails employees, fails the system. And that itself, we're going to dig into that today. But I think that's helpful context is to view surveys as a tool and think about using them for the sake of what? Right? Is it to provide proof of something? Right? Is it to provide validation for a pre-existing perspective we already bring? Or is it to truly contribute meaningfully to understanding the employee experience? And like I said, being more inclusive and being safe. And I know a lot of employees, self-included, the employee engagement survey comes in your mailbox and you're looking at it and thinking, how honest can I actually be? How confidential is this? Is this truly anonymous? And if so, what's going to happen with this data? Because last year they didn't do anything with it. So, I'm preempting us with some of the problems maybe that exist in that space. But let's maybe shift there. What are some of the challenges that we run into, or organizations and leaders run into when they're trying to design and deploy and use surveys for this?
Yeah, I think this connects really well back to the area of work that we're in terms of helping to close the gap between intention and impact. So I think leaders or organizations that are thinking about putting out a survey. I know we're talking about engagement surveys, but you could go as micro as onboarding, feedback on onboarding or offboarding, and so forth. Really setting the intention up front clearly of what is the purpose or job to be done by this survey, and how, whether that's contributing to other discovery activities, whether it's to take that feedback and then do, what are we going to do with it? What is the outcome? Because I think a lot of the time, and seeing is that of value for, if this survey data, we are planning to use it to improve the experience for employees, we should be asking them, does this survey allow you to provide your feedback that will help us with this problem? And because if it's not, and that's the thing with surveys, it's not going to work for 100% of your employees, but it's going to usually work for a good amount. In my experience, is a good amount is around 70%. If that response rate, it's quite healthy. You do better, great. That means you have a really, I think you have more than just a great survey, but people have trust in what you're going to do, their feedback, or the outcome of that. So there's like data. I'm sorry, I totally my brain.
Yes.
Did I answer that question?
I think so. I think that job to be done. Right? What's the point of this survey? What's going to provide us is a really critical thing. I think sometimes we just default to, oh, it's April, so I'm going to do the employee engagement survey again. It's the same one that we've run for the last 5 years. We've not done anything that meaningful with it. So let's maybe dig into. So that's the pre-considerations around surveying, is getting really clear on the job to be done. We probably dig into like the actual design of surveys, questions, some of the problems that exist in the actual questions that we're asking, because you alluded to asking powerful questions versus maybe transactional or tactical or surface level questions that maybe don't give us the depth of understanding we could get from that survey. So, and as always, this is a choose your own adventure conversation with Jeff Pablo about these topics. So maybe there's somewhere else that you want to go that's meaningful about, because what should leaders be thinking about, conscious of, when they're looking at their survey program and thinking about it? We've alluded to job to be done. Start there. And how do you think? What do you think comes next? What are some challenges that are going to come up for folks?
Yeah, I mean, we hear a lot about survey fatigue, and it doesn't. And right away, people think, oh, there's too many surveys. I disagree. I think it's because they don't trust in the value of that survey. They're tired.
Yep.
Right?
Fully agree.
Stop wasting my time because you're not doing anything with this data, or you're using it in ways that are unsafe or whatever. Right? So fatigue is not always a frequency thing. In fact, I challenge them. It's the intent there is definitely important. I'll give you an example. What I see with a lot of surveys right now is it's really about checking the box, saying that we've done this so we can do the annual reviews, so that we can set our strategy. I can tell you how many times I've struggled to see the strategic priorities that come out of the results. Like, I don't see the connection. And I'm an outsider, so I can't even imagine what that's like for people inside. So that's something. But then also this idea of doing them manually, like, does that really make sense? Especially at the pace at which the world is working right now, we should be checking it way more often. once a year, right? And I see with a lot of these surveys too, it's really about work. It's about promoting the employer brand. This is the identity that we want to have out there. So let's go out and get all these surveys done so we can say we're certified, we're this, we're that. And I get there's value. Don't get me wrong, right? But be honest about it with the employees that we do this survey because what it does is, and obviously we answer it authentically, but what it does is it allows us to continue to grow and attract, great people. But that's the problem I think I see is that a lot of these employee engagement or employee experience surveys, they're wrapping, we want to win an award with it. We want to find out more information about this one thing that we think is a problem. We haven't checked with our people if this is really a problem. And also the way that the questions are asked, you mentioned you said powerful questions. A lot of the time when I work for survey companies and I've used a lot in my role as people and culture leader, I even most in one section, they'll ask the question, tell us how you, and then in the next section, tell us how people generally. That's a lot of switching with your brain. So how helpful is that data, right? And so as an experienced designer, those are the things we're looking at. Who is this survey for? What is the type of feedback that we're looking for? Be specific. What is this? What are we trying to impact? Sorry, rambling now.
No, it's great. And we listed a few, there's lots of, even at the question level, like the types of questions that we're asking, you alluded to, context in which we're asking people to answer those from. And like you say, have asked people to shift multiple contexts inside of the survey experience that they're already probably a little bit not sold on the value of. I think it's a big ask, and I think that should be suspect a lot of data that comes out of those types of surveys. And if you can't trust that data as being truly authentic and inclusive, then the decisions that we make as a result of, there's that whole breakdown of decision making as a result of surveys. So lots of things you can do around survey design, and that's probably a separate podcast episode, or that's a learning and action session, kind of break down that process for design, create surveys. My concern, or one of my concerns, my primary concern probably with how employee engagement surveys are done is this idea of the either being used to validate pre-existing assumptions, or leaders who just focus in on one or two things and exclude everything else. I can't count the number of times I've been sitting at the table and I've watched leaders discount or dismiss evidence survey findings with lots of, well, they don't know, they don't have the perspective. We can't trust our employees to have the big picture perspective. It's this feedback, therefore, we're just going to dismiss it because they don't have a piece of information, as opposed to this is also a piece of information, it's data that we can incorporate with this other data. It's a lot of dismissing of information, I think, that comes out of surveys, especially if it's pitching feedback or if it's directed at leaders themselves. There's that by giving feedback about the system. Again, it goes back to the context. Or as a leader, am I taking this personally, right? And am I fearful as a leader about the results of this survey? So I want micromanage maybe the questions that get asked, right? That's another thing too. It's we only want to ask certain questions that we're confident we're going to get good answers to. And those kinds of behaviors, I think, show up in the survey engagement kind of design and use of surveys. My thoughts on that and how to mitigate maybe against some of those tendencies may show up on it.
Yeah, this is all experience design and being conscious of the power dynamics that might exist within the organization that's doing the survey. These are real examples that I have, and some of these I'm guilty of, earlier on in my career, and probably will continue making mistakes on. But for example, in my role as director of people and culture, the first reaction was sting, ouch, right? And it takes you a while to step outside of that to really focus on the positive. So I think that's one example where you're missing the positive feedback that's coming through that survey because I'm responsible for going through it with my team and making sense of the data, yet I'm so emotionally and personally attached to it. So what we can do there is either using technology or consultants. We like to talk about ourselves having the luxury to be in the balcony and watching the dance below. We can help to remove some of that personal emotional reaction to the data and really look at it for what it is. Right? That's one example. The other example I would give is, imagine, I don't know if this has happened to me, but I've definitely seen it happen to other people where oh my gosh, I can't share this with my boss. Gosh, they called out this person's name. Like, what do I do with this? I have to like downplay it. And you're taking away from that person's voice. Now, don't get me wrong, there's damaging things and harmful things that be saying in comments. But I see organizations struggle with that, and the feedback never really has this. It's not meaningful, it loses, right? So again, what can we do with that? I mean, there's obviously an awareness of this skill to making sense of survey data and actually creating surveys. But I would also say it's sometimes, going arm's length, having a trusted advisor to come in and to do that work will really open up areas you might be missing.
Yeah, and not to pitch our services. It's like, oh, we're going to pitch their services, but this is probably I would say, of all of the work that we do, the discovery in general, surveys included, but also one-on-one interviews, also focus groups, also other ways in which you collect data from the system. If you are going to outsource something to consultants, do that. Get them to come back with a full picture and what they found, because due to power dynamics, due to our biases, due to our emotional responses as leaders and the relationships we do or don't have with our team, we can never actually truly get what a third party can. Or somebody comes in objectively, we hear things from employees that their bosses never hear and probably won't hear, but contribute to the theme that is going to be actionable for that leader, for that team. And so for sure, connect with us if that's something you're interested in, but connect with somebody around that and get some help and support there. Because when it comes to the actual design of interventions and the delivery of that, you probably have the resources in-house to take care of some of that, or you can get those resources in place. We actually advocate for co-designing with your team the interventions based on the data that they've provided you. There's that data collection. It's a pretty sensitive thing, really comes down to it. And so again, kind of job to be done. What's at stake here? Is this about an external brand award-winning kind of survey? If that's the purpose, then like you said, be transparent with that and do that. But if it is to collect really meaningful data about the employee experience, like you said, it could be broadly speaking for the onboarding process. In our case, it might be psychological safety, meaningful connection, or conscious communication, or what the indicators of culture, those flags that you were talking about that says, hey, there's something here, and we can dig into that specifically. So, yeah, what else is there about surveys that support to wrap up this conversation?
Yeah, I would say a lot of the surveys out there are quite focused on transactional components or tactical components of the employee experience. From what's hiring, and those are great. I'm not saying don't do them, but it's not the only thing you should be looking at, right? So different surveys for different lens perspectives. And so I would say one opportunity I see for, new types of surveys are ones that look at the more relational or human-centered aspects of work, like that dig a bit deeper. You mentioned a few, like meaningful connection. I think psychological safety, we're starting to see that pop up, but even that, like, could we go deeper, right? What does inclusion safety look like? What is the safety around learning here or challenging? What's that safety look like? I think they're just scratching the surface there, right? And yeah, so in relation to, we also talk about this systems consciousness. They also don't take into account the systems that individual who's providing their feedback be a part of. And so you're missing that data. It's really the vacuum, right?
Yeah, and that's one of the experimenting with and working towards is creating surveys that capture more inclusive perspective and allow for deeper optional self-identification of different identities, because a lot of the DEI space, particularly this idea of diversity, inclusion, justice in organizations, a lot of that survey data is very, age, role, tenure in an organization tends to be kind of the baby gender we're getting into, but we're not getting into some of these other pieces that are give us more insight into the experiences at less of a high level. Like I look at sometimes if your survey spits out one final score and you scored a 72, what does that act like? cares? Like, that's a like, is that actually meaningful? Like, do we care, except at the highest level, to know that we scored 70 last year and 72 this year, so we're on the right track. But if that 72 came at the expense of a few different groups inside of your organization who are really struggling or suffering in ways that you're not aware of, I think it's what that awareness piece for me is, using that to as a jumping off point for deeper discovery, as opposed to, it tends to be the only or the last piece of discovery, and then we anchor to it, as opposed to, let's get curious about these results. Let's get curious about this specific subgroup, this department, this, this age range, those types of things. We could talk through some examples of that, perhaps that might help people to see what that might look like in practice. But I think that maybe the next phase of this, we've talked about kind of the design, the intention around it. We've talked about some of the actual like delivery and deployment of it, how surveys get used, how that data shows up in the system after the fact, how it gets shared back with employees or doesn't get shared back with employees. What are your thoughts on the, like, once we collect the data and synthesize it in some way, the first themes or some findings, what should teams be doing with that, or how can teams be with that information?
Yeah, so I think transparency in the process is super important. Here's data we're collecting, here's the question. So the question, here's the data. We're going to collect the data this way. For example, if we're asking optional questions to learn about groups that may exist in our organization, as high level as tenure to deeper to like neurodiversity, diverse abilities, pronouns, preferred pronouns. These are all options, right? That you could open up to your employees to learn more about the diversity and truly the value of people that you have in the organization. I think people just need to know how that data is going to be used. How are they going to be safe in that? And then even in like, how are you going to make sense of that data? I think something that we know our clients value is going through that experience with us, right? Because it helps to raise the level of awareness around, wow, this is how I was making sense of that. Oh, you're making sense of it that way? Wow, I didn't even see that. What connects us? Oh, we both value the same thing, but we totally read that. And that's the value of these surveys. They really spur these really exciting conversations. And then through that, we're able to identify maybe unique needs for a specific group or an intersectional group. We're able to identify maybe larger collective needs, values. And from that point, we actually can start to say, okay, well, now we're starting to form strategy, which is like our strategies, choices we're going to make, priorities to set. And this is always this piece. No one ever comes back and says, here's what we heard. We've had a conversation about it and we feel good about this. Here's what we are going to do, which could include things that we're not going to do. Like no one ever says that, right? And thank you for your feedback. And whatever the rollout, the roadmap looks like, engaging people in that. That's a huge gap.
Yeah, it's like as an employee, you get that survey, you click the link, you fill it in, and you never see anything ever again.
Or you fill it in like unsure. You know what I mean?
Yeah. There's lots of gaps and challenges, and we love that because there are opportunities to improve the experience. And like I said, it should be this experience design piece. I think is often the missing piece, is who is the intended end user of this, who's the beneficiary of this. If it truly is about employee experience, then how are we making sure we bring people along on that journey, like you said, not just at the transactional moment of filling out the survey, right? There's things we can do ahead of time to make it meaningful. There's things we can certainly do after the fact that we missed, that you mentioned, including people in the roadmap, including people in hey, this is how we made sense of it. Yeah, help us. Like, does this make sense to you? Does it resonate or not? There's so much richness gets lost in the discovery process when we shortcut it by just using surveys as a way to try and kind of spread out some information to the organization that, like I said earlier, win an award or throw it on the website. Awesome. Well, again, we go deeper into these types of topics, maybe well down the road. And if you as a listener are like, hey, that's great, I want to dig into a specific aspect of the discovery process. It's a lot of work around here with our clients. It's getting that true, authentic, intersectional perspective on the employee experience, ensuring that people are on these organizations. So we're happy to talk all day about that. It might have been that already. So, Pablo, any closing thoughts for culture surveys? What's a great next action step if somebody's got a employee experience survey they know they want to get out the door in the next few months? What's a great first step for them to take?
Yeah, I mean, we've got some tools for this, but otherwise, I mean, to simplify it, it would be like, what is the purpose of this activity we are about to kick off? Okay. Why does this matter? What are the different roles that are going to need to be involved in making this successful? This is this is what we think will be the outcome. We'll use this data to do this thing. Check that. Check your assumption with people. This is our approach we're thinking of taking to get to this place. Are we missing it? Right? I think that's very important. I think a lot of the times these surveys are just done because they're almost like this annual rhythm. And it's such a lost opportunity. So don't, my advice is don't, it's a huge opportunity. So we get very clear on the purpose of this survey, what you're trying to impact, and who needs to be involved in that. And then obviously, like, what you need to know in order to give you the feedback that you're looking for. And be specific. Don't try to like shoot one in 5 different topics, issues, just into one survey.
Let's leave it there. And until next time, thanks for listening. And by all means, we love your feedback. And so if this was a topic you want more of, or if there's something that wants to dig into, by all means, let us know via email. You can subscribe to this podcast, probably on most of the platforms, Spotify, Apple, and kinds of places. Thank you so much for listening. And we'll chat soon.